the main message is like whether it's ProClova or any pesticide, we just cannot have scenarios where pesticides are getting into water. I think that has to be the really clear message. The stewardship of all pesticides is really important. If ProClova or any pesticide for that matter starts turning up in the water, well, obviously the registrations will be revoked. So it's up to us. We were waiting, as you said, for a long time for a product like this. So it's up to us to mind it, really. And the way we can mind it is by observing the buffer zones, really.
Hello, I'm Stuart Childs and you're welcome to the Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. With clover now an integral part of dairy farm systems for the future, weed control for these swards is essential. Having taken me to some trial plots a number of years ago on new products for clover swards, I asked Ciaran Collins, Teagasc Tillage Specialist, to talk to me today about ProClova XL, which is the new product for weed control in white clover swards and reseeds, which has finally become available at commercial level. I started by asking Ciaran to give us a bit of background to this new chemistry.
Yeah, new chemistry, ring score combined with some older chemistry, aminosulfuran, which you'd find in Eagle. So, as you said, it seems like a long time ago now since we were in Mitchelstown there looking at those trials. And to be fair, there's a lot of work gone into it and a lot of positive results, especially in terms of weed control. Very, very, very broad spectrum. We can get into that in a minute. But I suppose it is a game changer, really, in fairness, in terms of new reseeds. We had been reliant on products containing 2,4-DB. And then, obviously, since that went off the market, we did an emergency use registration, which brought that back in, which I suppose was which was a great help, obviously, in the last couple of seasons. But now the ProClovas on the market, the 2,4-DB products now are, while it is still available under emergency use, it's just for red clover, which isn't covered by ProClova in the reseeds. Again, we can chat about that in a minute. So really, we've got white clover in the sward, and you're looking to control weeds, after reseed, I suppose ProClova really will be the go-to product.
And I suppose, Ciaran, the beauty of it is it's actually going to work in more mature swards as well. So the established grassland has always been a challenge to maintain clover, where there was weed burden there. Obviously, any of the really good sprays, I suppose, will kill the clover, generally speaking. Or the likes of Eagle, as you mentioned there, was only moderate enough control really of the mature weeds that might be in swards.
Yeah.
So it's a real bit. It is, as you said, a real game changer from the point of view of that there's options there now for people that have clover.
Yeah, 100%. I suppose the Eagle that you mentioned there is an option, certainly, but with very limited weed range. Really, you're just talking about docks, and look, for that job, it does well. Using good temperatures, using the right way, it's absolutely fine. But ProClova now is a very useful addition. So look, I suppose just some of the basics on it, really, in terms of application rate. It's 85 grams per hectare for the reseeds. It's 125 for established grassland. So the first, I suppose, difference, something that we wouldn't have had before, is before we would have said established grassland is a year after the reseed. Now we call established grassland once there's 90% ground cover. So if you're reseeding in the spring, before the end of the, quite quickly, you're going to have 90% ground cover there. So that does give you the option of using the higher rate. Or an issue that we often had was that, farmers just didn't get in on time, with the older type products, and you were trying to control bigger weeds. So here now you have that rate flexibility. You can use that slightly higher rate. 3 hectare pack for new layers of 2 hectares, then obviously for the established grass, the higher rate. I suppose importantly as well is the application window. Really, I think you're probably looking at from kind of April to October, really. Good growth is vital, I suppose, as with all products really, but good growth would be important. The growth stage then and the timing for the new lays, again, I suppose we talk about IPM, and one of the key points there is getting in early, spraying small actively growing weeds, because you're going to get the best control, and you start to rule out the repeat application. So if we can get in there early, and what I mean by early is kind of from the tree leaf stage of the grass, or when you have a trifoliate leaf on the clover. That's really important, because you're spraying small dock, small chickweed, and you're going to get better control. Once the weeds establish and get bigger, you can use the higher rate, but look, the challenge is bigger. And we know from research that's been done in Teagasc in the past that, getting in early is going to give you those longer term benefits. Just another one, a couple of kind of differences maybe. It comes as a kind of a twin pack. So the active itself is a water dispensable granule. So half fill the sprayer, put it in either, hopefully through an induction bowl, and then fill up the sprayer. That's just for good mixing. But it also does come with an adjuvant, and the adjuvant is vital, absolutely vital for the performance of the product. So that does help the uptake from the weeds. So that's I suppose the crucial one.
Will you just explain that, Ciaran, though, how it works? We'll say, people are probably more familiar with the term a sticker, really. Rather than the adjuvant, like to get it to bind onto the plant, basically, really, and that it kind of gets more time to work.
It does. Now, for a lot of products that we're familiar with most, I suppose, to be honest with you, the adjuvant is inbuilt within the product. So when you open your can of Pastor Trio, for argument's sake, there is a surfactant and an adjuvant built into that product. Not in this case. So that's why it's a twin pack. So you have to use the adjuvant. It comes separate, but they have to be used together, and it does help the uptake, and it's vital for those type of formulations that the adjuvant is added. Like,
and I suppose then there's a few bits and pieces around it. Like I suppose, just to clarify, when you said the IPM there, that's the integrated pest management piece. So that, as you said, we're trying to reduce the amount of pesticides as part of the Green Deal and so forth. That the objective there is to use it on the reseed to maximise the return from spraying those younger weeds, as you said there, and minimise the amount of chemical interference or interaction that will have to occur for that sward for its lifetime. So in an ideal scenario, you'd be talking about using your glyphosate to destroy the original sward. You sow your new sward and you spray that, and then you shouldn't, in theory, all things being equal, soil fertility is part of integrated pest management as well. So soil fertility being right, and not if we never damage the paddock and it never gets exposed or opened up, we should have a very weed-free lay for a good number of years, long enough probably to get to the point of reseeding it again without having to interfere with it effectively.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, the final piece of that is, and I'm no expert on it, but good grassland management, where, the field isn't poached, you don't allow spaces for weeds to come through. It's all kind of part of it. Like, but the glyphosate pre-sowing certainly for me is absolutely crucial. And then, as you say, the weed control, with the likes of ProClova in the mix as well. And I suppose I should say as well, like, I mean, I presume most swards do have white clover at this stage, but if there is, for whatever reason, or you're oversowing, there are other options like the fluoxipyr type products, the Pastor Trios. Those are options, but they will kill white clover. Like, so.
You're being a bit presumptuous about the level of clover that's out there.
Okay.
It's a work in progress, and in fairness, there's good work done, but it's there's been little kind of blockages in the road, obviously. So the waiting for the chemistry has been an important piece, and I think it's probably important, Ciaran, as you said there, the range that it has, and in terms of maybe the strength of the weeds that it, compared to the likes of the previous products that were there, we'll say, for the reseed clover reseeds, they were, as you said, old chemistry that aren't capable of handling very strong weeds. Like, so if you missed the boat, you were really on the back foot. Yeah,
we're done. Yeah, the likes of, I suppose, the 2,4-DB MCPA type products that we're familiar with, the Clover Maxes of this world. You really did have to be in there early, especially with ducks. You kind of had to get them. We're all familiar with the picture of the €2 coin, and you kind of had to be in at that size. And obviously, we don't always get reliable weather just to line up these things. And if they got away, and you were definitely struggling. So, I suppose, to be fair, this is a benefit of this product that you do have, it's a key strength is ducks, actually, to be fair to it. Mayweed, chickweed is another one, shepherd's purse on the label, red shank, the likes of knotweed, bindweed. To be honest, annual weeds don't ever cause me much bother because you can graze them out or you can top them. But for me, chickweed obviously is an annual weed, but it kind of behaves like a perennial to me, and I think that's a key one to get out, as are docks, obviously, as we know. One should say one key weakness here is thistles. You don't
But
have
again,
activity.
though, like you can get over it with spot spraying and so forth, and they generally aren't massive issues. I know there can be issues in places, I suppose, but I suppose is the best approach in that kind of a scenario would be to actually, would you spray? What way would you actually approach the likes of that? If you had a field that
Yeah,
had thistles
again,
in
it's
advance
it's
of burning of reseeding it, would you try to deal with it then rather than hoping that the glyphosate is going to deal with it, because there will be some seed in
yeah.
the sward, like.
Especially creeping thistle, which is a difficult one, like, because you obviously have a big root structure there to manage. So I think, yeah, the management before you go at the reseed is definitely very important. That you if you can cut it back, spray the regrowths if you're expecting a problem. Good establishment then is vital. On the sward. Get your likes of ProClova on, and then, as you said, look, it's the likes of spot spraying and grassland management after that. But if you can get a good established sward, in the case for all weeds, really, you will reduce the problem significantly. Like.
Okay, so Ciaran, I suppose as I said, the main reason for wanting to talk to you about ProClova is there's a few terms and conditions apply with it, like so. People may have seen the diagram that Corteva have put out with it through the Wheelahan Group, obviously distributing it in Ireland. Like there's a requirement for low drift nozzles. Again, that's a tillage thing, generally speaking. So will you just explain that piece first?
Yeah. As part of the registration process, it does require the use of low drift nozzles. So what is a low drift nozzle? I suppose maybe first. So you have a standard flat fan nozzle that we're familiar with. So a low drift nozzle is effectively, we call it also an air induction nozzle. So it takes in air through these orifices on the nozzle, and it produces larger droplets. So obviously larger droplets are going to fall more readily down and are less prone to drift. So the key requirement here is that the low drift nozzles are 75% or better. So that's the first one. And again, as you said, that's not something maybe that every grassland farmer might be familiar with or have on their sprayer, but it is a key requirement here for this product. And just on low drift nozzles as an aside, I think it's good practice anyway. Because, not just for ProClova, but for all pesticides that you're applying, because look, reducing drift is a key requirement. And obviously we need to keep all pesticides out of water, and it is a good help. And I suppose in case people are worried, there is no loss of efficacy, because what actually happens is the larger droplets, once they hit the target leaf, they disperse, and you still get very good coverage from them. So there's no loss of efficacy there. I suppose the second thing then is the buffer zones. Just to be aware that the buffer here is 3 meters, and you can't reduce beyond 3 meters. So just to be aware of that. And then the third thing that you mentioned then, which is going to be new as well, is the intersecting watercourses. So an intersecting watercourse is basically, if you think of a field, a hilly field, and you've got water at one end of it, it's where, if it rained, the water would run into the watercourse. So I always explain it, if you've got a field and there's a hill from north to south and there's a watercourse at the bottom of the field, well, that's the intersecting watercourse. It's where, when it rains, the water would run. So the use of ProClova is prohibited in fields with an intersecting watercourse. So that's very important to remember.
Yeah, and I suppose just where's the buffer from, Ciaran, as well? That's probably something that people aren't or maybe struggle with or aren't clear on, maybe.
Yeah, the top of the bank. That's the official way of doing it. I remember when we discussed this first, somebody said, and this won't happen like in reality, but if you could picture a diagram, if you were to put a ball, like, where it would stay on the top of the bank, too much one way, it'll fall into the stream, and the other way will go into the field. So that's the top of the bank anyway, is kind of where you'd measure from.
Okay, and just on the low drift nozzles again, Ciaran, like I was surprised actually, kind of like we've been talking about these with a good few years in the different conversations we've been having about sprays and so forth. And as I said, I'd say there's very few tillage farmers that aren't using low drift now at this stage, but the grassland aren't and haven't changed over to them, or there's been no real requirement for them. But you're making the point. There's two things to it. They're not expensive at all.
No,
which was very surprising to me. I was expecting them that they were going to be expensive, and that's why people weren't changing. Effectively, maybe 100 or 150 euro would have the standard farmer sprayer changed over to low drift.
Yeah, depending obviously on the width of the sprayer, but yeah, it's not a big thing really, No, there possibly will be promotions down the road. I'd expect from different companies as well, just to promote the use of them, which is excellent now, and very welcome.
And then the advantage of it then as well, you were giving me an example there earlier as well, that actually using this 75% or maybe the 90% can actually allow you extend reduce the buffer zone that you might be spraying with some sprays, and people probably aren't aware of that there's a buffer with most of the sprays, if not all of them really.
Yeah, just as a kind of a recap, there's a 3 metre mandatory buffer next to water. So regardless of any nozzle type, you have a 3 metre buffer. But like an awful lot of grassland herbicides would be 5 meters. Now, just to explain the 5 meter, when you read the label and you see, say, take an example of Pastor Trio, I just mentioned our product a while ago, that's got a 5 meter buffer. So that 5 meter, that's out 5 meters then with a standard flat fan nozzle. However, if you have low drift nozzles, that does allow you to reduce that buffer, but you can't reduce it it can reduce it up to 3 meters, but you can't further reduce it. But still, like you said, the low drift nozzle will allow a bit of flexibility on some of the other products, but also, again, as I said, just to reduce drift in a general sense anyway, which is obviously good practice.
Yeah, so that must be a big advantage actually, to be fair, when you think about it. When I think of spraying, as I said, coming from a grassland background, you think of that mist coming off the back of the sprayer, whereas with the low drift nozzles, that's probably not as evident, I would imagine, because you're dealing with that bigger droplet.
Key difference really, bigger droplets, and they'll just fall a bit quicker. And as I said, they do disperse on the leaf quite well, so I wouldn't be worried about loss of efficacy on that one, no.
So I suppose the other point then is maybe red clover. How does that interact with the ProClova? It can be used on it, but it can't be used in the reseed. And what do people do with the red clover reseeds? And then because there's a good bit of that gone in and going in at the minute on the back of the scheme. So people will have to deal with weed burden in those reseeds as well.
Yeah, so just under ProClova, to close that one off, it can be used on red clover, but the red clover has to have overwintered. So if you're sowing red clover, say today, it's going to be next spring before you can follow up there, so that's the ProClova. The other option then is the 2,4-DB MCPA mixes that we spoke about earlier on, the Clover Max type products. There is an emergency use registration specifically for those red clover reseeds. So there is an option there. There's terms and conditions going with that, and there's an application window on that. But again, talk to your supplier, and they'll be able to fill you in on those details. But there is that option, or else you wait until the red clover is overwintered, and you can use ProClova then the following season. But then you may have other weeds that challenges develop at that stage,
Just on the stage of spraying for the white clover, is that slightly different to the likes of Clover Max in that they're talking about this trifoliate leaf?
Yeah.
It needs to be stronger effectively before it is sprayed than it might have been with Clover Max.
Yeah, I would have always said that trifoliate leaf would be your kind of starting point. Now, I suppose it also should be said that your colleague there, Moorpark Park, Mike Egan, has done some work on it. And from what I can understand, is that you do get a reduction in clover after the application, but over the duration of the season with good management, it does recover. So I suppose that's just something for people to be aware of. You will see a reduction in clover, sprayed versus unsprayed for a period of time, and then through good management in that it will recover and back to where you want it to be.
So effectively, from my understanding is from what I've seen about it is that it'll look like it's actually been taken out by the spray, and it'll curl a little bit, and then it'll come back to life again as such and get going again.
that time we saw the trials now, I think that was quite evident. Like we did see different spraying dates, and to be fair, where it had been out for a couple of months, you could see the clover had fully recovered there. So yeah.
So finally, Ciaran, I suppose there's just another piece of awareness needed around glyphosate. There's a few changes around that as well. So glyphosate is our main compound, in the likes of Roundup is the trade name. Obviously, there's lots of different versions of it out there and so forth. What's new in that area?
Yeah, so the big one, I suppose, really is, again, the 3 metre buffer applies, and you can't reduce that any further. I suppose the main change for grassland, most of the changes on the label are to do with tillage crops, but the grassland change is the max rate of a 360 product now is 4 litres per hectare, not 6. That's very important for people burning off. 6 litres of a 360 product would have been, widely practiced. That max now is 4. And I suppose just to be aware, we are in this sort of changeover period where there will be some what we call old label stuff in the market. The use up of that is actually, I can't remember the month, but it's 2025 anyway. So that use up is there. So if you have that in stock, you can still use that up. You could actually technically still use the 6 litres there. But if you go to your supplier now and you buy glyphosate, the chances are you'll be buying the new label glyphosate. So therefore, the 4 litre rate applies for burning off for reseed. So just an important one to remember.
Okay, and Ciaran, just to clarify this, as I said, I feel that people maybe aren't clear on this. The buffers that we're talking about there, if you don't spray them, is there going to be a weed in it?
Yeah, look, the 3 metres is what it is. For reseeding, as you say, you've got your 3 metres, so there'll be no glyphosate, and there'll be no herbicide afterwards as well. So look, that's whether you cultivate that or not, or maybe just leave it and manage it. I don't know. And I suppose the other one to remember, you'll be better on this than me, but I think if you have a stocking rate, is it over 130? Isn't the wire is out now? Is it 1.5 meters?
1.5 meters, yeah.
Yeah, so again, that's going to be a factor as well,
Well, I suppose it helps keep you out, though. That's the only thing.
It certainly does, yeah. That's what I'm coming to, you have 1.5 meters anyway from the top of the bank that you're effectively obviously not using anyway. And I suppose really, for me, the main message is whether it's ProClova or any pesticide, we just cannot have scenarios where pesticides are getting into water. I think that has to be the really clear message. The stewardship of all pesticides is really important. If ProClova or any pesticide for that matter starts turning up in the water, well, obviously the registrations will be revoked. So it's up to us. We were waiting, as you said, for a long time for a product like this. So it's up to us to mind it, really, and the way we can mind it is by observing the buffer zones, really.
Okay, so Ciaran, thanks very much for coming on and I suppose making us a good bit more clearer and making us aware of maybe, pitfalls isn't the right term, but we'll say the terms and conditions, I suppose, that go with ProClova. It's not a carte blanche, basically, necessarily to use across the board. And people just have to be careful, especially that watercourse piece and the low drift nozzles. And the reason we're talking about that is that these are cross-compliance issues, and where people will have cross-compliance inspections, they are going to possibly get tripped up here if they're not aware of these. So it's, as you said, look, the main reason that we're talking about it is exactly as you said there, because we don't want them getting into the water, but it's just to make people aware of them, because there'll be plenty written in the paper and plenty mentioned in different places and so forth, but not everybody might hear it, and this is a good medium maybe to get it out to people. So thanks for joining me today. We'll talk again, I'm sure. That's all for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to Ciaran Collins for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Stuart Childs, and join us next time for your Dairy Edge.